Welcome into the DFS Den. It's Dave Eddy here, aka Corporal Eddy on Twitter. You never know who's going to be next to me. Today I got my good friend here, Keith Flemming. Detroit BC is unfortunately under the weather. I think I gave him what I had last week, but extraordinarily happy to have Keith in. It's almost Keith becoming kind of a, you know, that two of the three of us are going to be here, but you can almost pick names off a hat at this point. You know, it's always a mix of the three of us, man.
I'm lucky to be here. So happy to chop it up with both of you guys. No, seriously. Chop it up with both of you guys. Love talking DFS with you and hopefully get some winners.
Yeah, man. I'm very thankful to have you here. To be dead honest, you know, but between yourself and Chris, I honestly would not rather be with two other individuals doing this. So greatly appreciate it, man. I mean, when, you know, if it wasn't for you, if Chris were to miss an episode, or if I were to have to miss an episode for, you know, whatever, because I wasn't even supposed to be here tonight, right? Like, It was supposed to be Chris because I had some stuff going on. But here I am. But if it wasn't for you, if I couldn't be around, I would feel really, really bad. Or if Chris couldn't be around, you know, I'd be like, ah. But when either of us can't make it, knowing that you're gonna be here to fill in, I feel like we don't lose a beat. We don't. You know, nothing is worse. It's just status quo. And so, I mean, I'm not saying that I look forward to Chris missing weeks, but I do.
I get to come on here.
So. I do really look forward to, you know, like I don't consider it like a bad thing where it's like, oh man, I gotta do this with Keith now. Oh,
that freaking Falcons fan. This sucks.
Oh God, no, you're not wrong there. But we're going to do things a little bit different here. I mean, it's kind of a last minute thing that you and I are doing this. And we're both kind of looking at things this season from a cash perspective. I think that's pretty fair to say. Obviously, we both, you know, still dabble.
Not to take an aside, but I constantly tell like people that listen to my stuff, all my plays or whatever, most people, that's what you should do. Like, you're not going to win. Obviously, it's big. There's not the rush of, you know, having a great week and winning a big prize. But I mean, 50-50s are such a good way to win money. And you think about, like, for instance, if you make a gambling bet, usually at best, right, it's 50-50 odds. You know, you're winning double whatever you put in, and you just have such a better chance of cashing. Like, there's been weeks I've ended up cashing on double ups. I'm like, how the hell did I pull that off? And you don't ever do that. And, you know, even the big single entry events.
I mean, I did have a pretty good sweat. I won't get into the details, but I know you know what I'm talking about. Last week, I was looking at high five figures for
a very
for
good day.
Week. Yeah, it didn't finish in that regard, but still,
good week.
Now, of course, you can't do that in cash, and it's funny because I texted you earlier in the week, and I was like, you know, the biggest bummer about doing this cash stuff is I don't even really have opportunities for, you know, for four-figure weeks. And then I turn around and have a 4-figure week last week. And it was high fives for a while, like I said. But so, yeah, I still dabble, but I focus on cash because I still think that there's an edge to be had in cash. And it really comes down a lot of times to just simply being risk adverse. I mean, it's just, I wouldn't say being safe, but yeah, it's kind of what it is. You're kind of just, what's the safest lineup that I can put out there? And, you know, yeah, I'm not going to shy away from upside, but I'm going to take, you know, a high floor approach. I mean, obviously, but the point
is similar to poker, right? That it's like, if you're in a huge field and you play a little bit more by the numbers or a little bit more conservative, you're probably going to get your brains beat in. But if you're at a cash table with at the most, you know, 9 other people, you play that way, most days you are going to leave the table winning money, not losing it. And I think it's very similar in, you know, DFS.
And it's funny that you say that because I don't think that, you know, and you and I can talk about this some other time, I don't think that you know the poker background that I have.
I don't.
Okay, well, you and I can talk. I have a very
I love cards, man.
Very deep poker background that you and I can discuss. And I've always said, and I don't think that that's me being biased because of that poker background. I think there is a very strong correlation between poker skill, because it's almost just like the game theory. It's not almost, it is. It's the game theory portion of poker translates extraordinarily well into DFS. And one of the people that I look up to the most has almost the same backstory as me, and that's TJ Hernandez from 4 for 4. He also has a very strong poker background, and I don't think that it's any coincidence that TJ and I almost share the same brain. I mean, it's crazy, when I see the stuff that he does, and we're doing very similar things. And we don't talk. I mean, we know each other, and
Right.
we communicate, but it's not like I talk to him like I talk to you. And we end up doing very similar stuff every single week, and it's really creepy. But same mindset. And so I now that I know a little bit about that about you, it's like, oh, okay, well, that's why you and I are kind of on the same wavelength too. But because of just a variety of things, this is going to be a very cash focused episode here. So do with it what you will. But with that being said, Keith, let's go ahead and just hop on into what we got going on. I've actually got a much smaller player pool than typical this week. I know from talking with you that you have a smaller pool as well. So if anything, we'll get through this a little bit quicker. But for me, the smaller pool revolves around the fact of what I always say, that every slate is unique. And this slate is
Garbage.
Is unique in the fact that, it's garbage. There's not a whole lot. So in a lot of ways, often my cash lineup kind of builds itself throughout the week, and when I say that, and normally, Chris and I don't have so much time to just BS and talk like we are, because we've got a lot of guys to get into. But I know, I can't believe Joe's watching on a fairly unscripted show. So, hey, Joe. But we got a little time to chat. And so I just kind of want to talk a little bit about, kind of how my player pool worked out this week, because it is trash, and kind of how I say a lot of times, sometimes my cash lineup builds itself, and why that is. So for me, I go through as I'm building my pool for the week. And I even today, in our private Discord, I was talking my way through the addition of Aiden O'Connell, because I wanted to consider putting him into my cash pool, but I needed to run things and see, how does it work? How does he compare to other guys I'm considering? What can I build with Aiden O'Connell? And that's how I determined, is he going to be my cash pool or not? I can't just blindly say, oh yeah, $4,500 quarterback on DraftKings. Sure. I know I can make the salary work, but what does the lineup look like? So when I say a cash lineup often will build itself, what I mean by that is, certain guys, either early in the week or as the week goes on, start to become locks for me, right? Like this week, I knew right away I wanted to play Alvin Kamara. After a little bit of looking at things, well, yeah, I mean, it is what it is. But after looking at things, Saquon Barkley became a guy who has worked his way into a lock for me. I only had 4 running backs in my pool to begin with. Those 2 guys, Rashad White and Josh Jacobs. And so Josh Jacobs started looking really interesting. Now that we have Aiden O'Connell, now he becomes another guy that I looked at, and I'm like, boy, man, maybe I just lock him in too, have 3 stud running backs, and then I go from there. I got A.J. Brown, who I'll talk about, is looking like a lock for me. So when you have those 4 guys, all of a sudden, still within the constraints of the pool, there's not a ton of ways to go. There's only so many ways to go from there. So that's what I mean by the cash lineup will oftentimes build itself. And that revolves around, determining this guy is now a lock. This guy is now a lock. This guy is now a lock. And so, it'll start whittling that pool down. So quarterback wise, I had a few more guys earlier in the week. As of right now, I'm down to 2. I mean, for me right now, it's between Aiden O'Connell and Jordan Love. And I'm not super thrilled about Aiden O'Connell, but his salary is fantastic. And very often paying down at quarterback ends up being the correct way to go. Now, Jordan Love is also paying down at quarterback. And I think I'm going to go Jordan Love at the end of the day. And it comes down to a couple things. Number one, Aiden O'Connell, right? He had 1 start this year, and he, 3x his money. Now, in cash, typically, as long as I think a guy is going to 3x his salary. So what that means is, for example, Aiden O'Connell, 4,500 on DraftKings this week. So really what I need is 4.5 times 3. So I need him to get 13 and a half points. If I think he can get 13 and a half points, to me, he becomes cash viable. So the week he started week 4 against the Chargers, 3.2x on his salary. So I would say if you played him, that's absolutely fine, right? A little bit more expensive this week, but whatever. Again, you need 13 and a half points from him. Well, you can look and say, well, when the last time he started, he 3x'd. Could he do it again this week? Here's where I have a strong hesitation on Aiden O'Connell, right? Yes, he 3x'd the one time he started. The one time he started was against the Chargers, who are dead last in schedule-adjusted fantasy points to quarterback. So he got the absolute best start possible. Now, this week he goes up against the Giants, and the Giants are not amazing necessarily against quarterbacks, right? But
defense has been pretty good the last couple of weeks, too.
Yeah, they're 5th in schedule-adjusted fantasy points to quarterbacks. So you could argue he's got the 5th toughest matchup. Now, if he just barely got that 3x against the best matchup, I don't know how confident I am in him this week. So, I mean, if I didn't have another pay down option that I liked, and a lot of people are not in on Jordan Love because he hasn't been great, but minus, week 5, he pretty much is 3x his salary every week. And like I said, that's all I'm looking for, especially when I'm paying down. Now the last 2 weeks, he's 2.7, 2.8. So not quite 3x, but we're nitpicking a little bit there. So outside of 1 week, a matchup against Vegas, he has hit this value each week, and he is, other than week 1, he's as cheap as he's been. And he's going up against the Rams, who they're not a tough matchup. When I look here, schedule adjusted fantasy points to quarterbacks, the Rams are 23rd. So they're not terrible, but they are in the bottom half of the league. So I think that Jordan Love is absolutely fine for cash. I don't hear anybody talking about playing Jordan Love in cash because he's not sexy or anything like that.
He's no Aaron Rodgers.
No, he's been quote unquote disappointing, but right. I think he's been disappointing from like a GPP perspective, right?
From the first 4 weeks, he scored a ton of points.
Yeah, for cash, he's been absolutely fine. So I think that's where I'm going to go because those are the only 2 guys I'm really considering. I think a lot of people are going to play Dak.
Yeah, I'm about to talk about him.
I mean, I get it, but for me, Dak is a completely different person at home and on the road. Completely, he is like an MVP caliber quarterback at home. On the road, he is like one of the worst quarterbacks in the league. And he's got a great matchup. I mean, Philly is an absolute pass funnel. They're so tough against the run that everyone has a pass on them. Obviously, we know Dallas can pass the ball. They pass at a high rate, but they're on the road, and I just trust Jordan Love more, and I know some people will find that to be crazy. I'd love to pay up for like a Jalen Hurts, but I just don't think that this is the slate where that's really possible. But so that's what I'm looking at from a quarterback perspective. I think O'Connell is in play if you want to go that route. I think that it's even more risky than you think it is. And then I'm looking at just simply Jordan Love because $5,500 on DraftKings. I need basically 16.5 points. I think that's about where he's going to finish. He's going to finish between 15 and 20, and then I can just move on.
Yeah, I've got 2 guys. I know, again, Dak going to be high owned. I feel like for this slate, this is a slate where you have Jaron Hall, Tyson Bagent, PJ Walker, Aiden O'Connell.
I think Deshaun Watson is starting, FYI.
Okay. Well, that's not much better from what we've seen.
I know, but I'm just saying.
I know. I'm just messing. I just think there's value at Dak only because Philly has been so bad against quarterbacks. I think it's
31st schedule adjusted fantasy. So second easiest matchup for quarterbacks point wise. Yeah.
It's easy to forget that Dak had a new offensive coordinator this year, a new number 2 receiver, a new tight end. It's taken some time to adjust. Yeah, I don't want any of that. Not this week.
No Kyler Murray. Nope, not this week.
Maybe for like fantasy league if you just need a 1 week filler, but not for DFS.
Not for DFS.
back-to-back games with his most passing yards of the year. If you look at it, Dallas really started to spread the field more, run more 3 receiver sets, which is where Philadelphia has been awful in coverage this year. He scored more points, or almost the exact same points the last 2 games as he did in his first 4. And you can throw it on the Eagles. He's had some good games versus them recently. I know the game last year was in Dallas, but he had 330 and 3 touchdowns versus them. But he's actually had some other good games versus Philly. They've had a good run where they've scored, I believe it was like 30 points or more in 4 out of the last 5 games that he started versus them. And I just think this game becomes a shootout because I don't think Dallas is going to be able to necessarily stop Philly. And there's 3 quarterbacks that I feel really good will score at least 20 points. The other 2 are $1,500 more.
Yeah.
And I like that saving right there. Again, I know he's probably going to be high owned, but if he has the game, I think he will. I just think he's, worth it. The other guy is Mac Jones, 4,900 versus Washington. I know you're probably going, Keith, come on. But it's such a good matchup. Like
30th in adjusted fantasy points. So they're literally, they're tied with Philadelphia, to be honest. They're both at 19.9 points a game to quarterbacks.
But Dave, they did that with 2 of the best pass rushers in the league, who were top 13 in pressures and both top 20 in sacks. They're gone. Normally, when you take pressure away from a bad secondary, yikes. Yeah. I think that there's a real chance for this game to be the sneaky shootout game of the week. Like, I really could see both teams being able to move the ball. New England has not been as good with, the injuries that they've had to their defense. Look at the difference in the first game versus Miami when they had Gonzalez, when they had all their guys. And then this last time they kind of got, burnt up. I think you can really do it. Washington, the last 7 weeks, they've had every quarterback they've finished or played against has been top 10 on DK for the week. 5 of them top 7. All have scored at least 21.66 points or more. In that span, QBs are averaging 27 points per game. In back-to-back weeks, Desmond Ridder, who had 3 turnovers, and Tyrod Taylor both scored 21-plus points versus this defense. And again, I don't think enough is being made of. They're so bad against the pass. And they had arguably 2 of the best 15 pass rushers by no matter what metric you want to look at it on the field at the same time. They just took them both away. I just think he's going to have time. I really like Douglas this week as well, who I'll get into when I get to the receiver. And if I go with Mac and stack him with that's 8,900 for, in my opinion, a great QB receiver matchup. And then it gives me a ton of flexibility because I know you're really high on some of the more expensive running backs who a couple of them I really like. I just couldn't get there with the lineups I was trying to make. But if I go that way, I could. Yeah. So
Mac Jones was the guy who at least was under consideration for my initial pool. 2 reasons that he didn't make it for me. Number one, he has been so damn inconsistent.
Oh, for sure.
It wasn't more than a couple weeks ago we were talking about Bailey Zappi, being the quarterback. That's how bad he's been. Now he loses by far his best receiver, Kendrick Bourne. He's now out for the season. I totally get it. No Montez Sweat, no Chase Young, completely just obliterates any pressure that they're going to get. And to be fair, you could put me back there with no pressure, and I could be relatively serviceable. So Mac Jones, it doesn't matter who he's throwing to. If he's got the time, that makes a world of difference. But for $600 more, I like the security of, it's cash. I like the security of Jordan Love being a pretty safe bet to get my 3X. Dak isn't even, to me, a safe bet to get 3X. Let me find Dak again here. Where the hell did the Cowboys go? There they are. Dak's been all over the place, but like I said, he has been
huge difference since their bye.
He has been
last 2 starts. Just they've changed the offense a good bit. They've looked much better.
Like he's like one of the worst quarterbacks in the league on the road, and it's not like a small sample size either. So I think a lot of people are going to play Dak, and so I'm either going to be right or I'm going to be wrong. I'm going to go with my track record and my history of success, and I'm going to say I trust Jordan Love crazy enough more than I do Dak this week.
That's a little crazy, but I understand what you mean.
I know, but that's where I'm going. I'm not even saying that Jordan Love is going to outscore Dak.
No, I know exactly what you mean.
But I think the line of the the $1,000 savings I think makes a world of difference. And why is that? Running backs, right? That's where we're going to go next. I have 5 guys because I talked to you a little bit. But I had 4 guys originally, and I'll get into the 5th here in a second. Like I said, Kamara locked for me from the beginning. I don't even need to get into it.
12.36 points per game just in receiving this year.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Saquon Barkley, a guy that I absolutely loved as well. He just gets so much volume, and at the end of the day, it's volume over everything. And there's no reason to think that Saquon is not going to get 20 plus touches, 25 plus touches in this matchup. Josh Jacobs is another guy, and I actually kind of like him better with Aiden O'Connell under center than I do Jimmy G, to be honest with you. I think they're going to lean on the run more, and we've seen in the one start that Aiden O'Connell had. He had 11 targets. He had 8 catches that week. Now, that's a very small sample size, but it makes sense that, a rookie quarterback is going to lean on, short passes, tight ends, running backs. And Josh Jacobs gets a ton of targets as it is. So I can play 3 cheat code running backs. I can play 3 guys that not only are great running backs, but they're great at catching passes, which is an absolute gold mine on DK. So I have those 3 guys nearly locked in. The other guy that is under consideration was Rachaad White, just because he's got a pretty decent matchup against Houston. He's another guy.
Rolling it to him a lot the last couple of weeks.
Yep, he's got 13 targets and 13 catches each of the last 2 weeks, and that's kind of why I was so in on Rachaad White at the beginning of the season, is because of the passing work he gets.
It was weird that they did this. That was how he was most effective last year, both in a football sense, not just fantasy.
Yeah, but that was the 4th guy that I was interested in. But this is where my cash lineup kind of built itself, because I want to play these 3 stud running backs. Now, you had talked to me earlier before we got on here about Bijan Robinson, who was under consideration for me. I had forgotten the Drake London news. The reason I wasn't originally going to do the show, I've been out and about tonight. I've had some events that I've been at. So I really didn't have my nose to things like normal. So with Drake London being out, I think that makes Bijan very interesting. And I'm now going to have to consider on Sunday, do I want to go Bijan and upgrade my defense, or do I want to stick with Josh Jacobs and go with a little bit more risky defense? I don't know, but I would firmly put Bijan Robinson into that cash pool as well. And Joe here's got a question. Devin Singletary with Dameon Pierce being out.
Big events, I love it. Because I think he's 4,800 this week.
Yeah, so when I look, 4,300 on DraftKings.
43 even better.
Let's see. Tampa's decent against running backs, I do believe. Tampa, and this is where I wouldn't play him, because I was talking with Garrett Ball, another one of our fantasy 6-pack guys, and he shared his cash lineup with me, and he had Devin Singletary in there, and I hadn't heard the Pierce news.
Oh no, I'm not talking about for cash lineups. I'm talking about in big entry events, just because of the money you'd save.
So to be fair, and I'll say this, and this is kind of a cop out, but it isn't. In big large field, you could tell me anybody, and I would say, yeah, in large field MME, they're in play. And if you want to play Brock Wright, the 3rd tight end on the Lions, I'm not going to tell you no in MME. In large field, you can do whatever you want to. But Tampa Bay, 2nd least schedule adjusted fantasy points to running backs. Even in a normal week, that's not a pay down running back that interests me. I know we say volume over matchup. I say volume over matchup. I don't know that Devin Singletary is going to get the volume there. I think that, Tampa is 21st against receivers schedule adjusted fantasy points, right? So if anything, we've seen that they, CJ Stroud can throw the ball. He can throw the ball a lot. He can get high volume in that passing game. I think that that's where they're going to lean. So for me, even with the news of Pierce being out, I'm still not even going to put Singletary in my cash pool, because I'm not playing him. I'm going to play Kamara. I'm going to play Barkley, and I'm going to play either Jacobs or Bijan. I don't need to get to Devin Singletary. So that's my thoughts on that. But where are you at there, Keith?
Well, Kamara, again, you don't really have to explain it. I'm kind of shocked he's not more than what he is.
He is going up though. He was.
It's rapidly rising.
7,300 last week on DK. He's up
81.
to 81 now. So I mean, huge jump. Started at 61 when he first came back.
He's been in my lineup for a few weeks. Yeah, it's
absolutely
been great.
smashing.
It's been great. But the Bijan thing for me, again, I think he's a value at this point because he's got a pretty high floor. I mean, if you look at, he scored 12 points in every game except for the fiasco versus Tampa Bay. He's seeing 5.28 targets per, 4.3 receptions, and that's what I like. Heineke, I went back and looked at all of his pass attempts last year, and where the targets went. 64 of his 259 passes went to running backs. That's 24.3%.
Yeah.
My boy Dave was smart enough to get me to look up, because I didn't even think about this, Sam Howell and the Washington Commanders this year.
Yeah.
And it has gone down considerably. It's at like 13, 14%.
Yeah, because my question to you was simply, is it a Washington
or
thing?
A scheme? Yeah.
Or is it a Taylor Heineke thing?
Yep.
And we have determined that it is indeed a Taylor Heineke thing.
Bijan last week, 4 of his 5 targets came in the second half with Heineke. He got the touchdown. And then again, last week for Heineke, threw 21 passes in the second half, 5 of the 21 were to running backs. That's 23.8%. So again, we're right on that number that he had the season before. The other guy I really like, I do. I really like them both. But I think you should either play Taylor or Moss. I like Taylor more this week at 6,400.
But are you saying from a cash perspective?
Yeah, because I think there's so much upside for him at 6,400 versus this defense. Again, the Panthers have allowed 100.
Would you play him though? So, I mean, 6,100 for Bijan, 64 for Taylor. That's close enough. Which of those two would you prefer? You could only pick one. Who are you taking?
Most of my lineups, I'm ended up going with both of them and Kamara. But
fair enough then. Okay.
But I mean, if I had to pick one of those two, I would still lean Taylor just because.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, the Panthers are so bad. 130 yards or more, 14 touchdowns. They played 7 games. They've given up 14 freaking rushing touchdowns.
Yeah.
Taylor. Do what? Go ahead.
31st in schedule adjusted fantasy points. So second worst, only behind Denver. Now, granted, they're a full 3 points behind Denver. Denver is by far the worst.
Yeah, but that's a lot of that's because they gave up 4,000 yards to Miami and 7 touchdowns.
I know, but Carolina is terrible. That's where, like I told you, Jonathan Taylor was in consideration for me. I just am not confident, and I know you'll probably get into your explanation on this, but I'm not confident that he's going to see enough volume for cash for me that I'm going to play him, as opposed to I'm already playing Kamara and Barkley. I am almost surely playing either Jacobs or Bijan. I don't have any interest in Taylor over any of those guys. But me personally, it's too dangerous for me. And MME, even a small field MME, if you want to go Jonathan Taylor, absolutely. I think, yes, he has the potential. He could put up 40, but he also could put up like 10. I mean, I don't know. It's just for cash, I can't do it.
I just, again, look at it that if you look at the snap share and route participation, the first week that him and Moss played together, Moss played 80% of the snaps. Taylor played 15. The route participation, Moss 60%, Taylor 3. The following week, again, it went up just a little bit, 43%. Moss came all the way down to 48. This last week, 60% for Taylor, 53 in the route participation. You say that, again, Taylor has had more carries over the last 2 weeks, more total touches. He's up to averaging 18 per over the last 2 games. The big thing for me, 7 red zone carries in just the last 2 games against the second worst run defense, maybe the worst run defense in the NFL. 217 total yards compared to Moss, who's had 136. And then the big thing, Taylor's 6th in yards per touch among running backs. I know it's a small sample size. He's only played 4, where a lot of guys have played 7, 8 games, but still, Taylor is, I mean, I love Moss. He's been great. If one of these guys is going to go bananas, I just think there's a great chance Taylor, he's starting to do some explosive plays. He's had back-to-back weeks with a play of 20 yards or more, either a rush or a reception. I just think that there's a lot of upside at this. And I mean, again, I think you should play one of them because it's just such a juicy matchup. And I don't think Carolina is going to be able to stop their run. And I think Carolina is going to be able to move the ball on Indy too, because Indy's defense is terrible.
Yeah. It's just, you said if so many times there. And that's where
sometimes
I
though
can't.
you got to do that, right? Like
No, I get it, but I'm just saying that's why I can't do it in cash. There's so many ifs, and to Joe's point, he said Moss won't go away. He's not saying that Moss is like taking over that backfield, but Moss is a problem because he's been so good. If you could take Moss out of the equation, whatever the reason, whether he was injured and Taylor gets the backfield, or whether they just said, hey, we're just going Taylor, which I don't know why they haven't yet. But if you told me that Taylor was leading that backfield, then yes, he would be a lock for me. I would be playing Taylor, Kamara, and Barkley. I wouldn't even be considering anything else. Unfortunately, that's just not the way. That's just not the world that we're in right now. Hey, Jamie, hope to see your face get silly strained here in a couple days.
Again, the 7 red zone, carries the last 2 weeks. They're going to be in the red zone a lot this week. I would be shocked if Taylor doesn't have 70, 80 yards on the ground, maybe 1 or 2 receptions. And I think he's going to score at least 1 touchdown, and it would not shock me if he scores 2.
So let me ask you this then. Are you familiar with the silly strings picks that we're doing?
Yes.
Do you then want to go on the board right now?
No.
Okay,
no.
So then that's what I mean. I can't play Jonathan Taylor in cash if you aren't even willing
though.
to bet
that's my point.
on your face on
You're talking about those sometimes like where you get too conservative. Yeah, I feel like it's too conservative. You feel like because I think Taylor has the potential to be a top 5 back this week. I really do. It's such a good matchup.
Yes, he could. But
okay, but
he's an MME play for me. Not MME. I will probably. He very well will be an MME running back for me just to get a little bit different. Because he could be the highest scoring back of the week.
But I'm saying you're going with Josh Jacobs with O'Connell, and I think it's just as risky with him. Just volume is not.
I don't think so.
You just said earlier, volume is not always better, and volume against
volume is always better. I said I don't think that. I was talking about Singletary. I said I don't know that Singletary is going to get the volume, and I also don't know that Taylor's going to get the volume. Taylor, great. Again, we can both be on different sides, and it's fine. I mean, I nothing that you're saying is crazy. I'm not really disagreeing with you on principle. I'm more just saying Taylor for me, MME play, no problem. Cash, I just can't do it. Like personally, I can't do it. Any more running backs for you, Keith?
No, that's it.
Okay, I thought so, but I wasn't sure. We'll move into wide receivers here. I've actually got more wide receivers than I probably should. There's only so many that I'm really going to play because I'm pretty locked in on running backs, right? I've told you I'm playing Kamara, Barkley, and I'm probably playing either Bijan or Josh Jacobs. So, that's going to leave me with some of the cheaper guys because how much money do I have to spend, That being said, A.J. Brown's a guy that I have to look at. Matchup is not fantastic against Dallas, but I mean, A.J. Brown has just, I've been on a historic run here, and
good trade, Tennessee.
Oh my God, he's been just phenomenal. So I don't think I need to get into why you would play A.J. Brown, but it is a little bit concerning. Let's look up Dallas here. So Dallas is 3rd in schedule adjusted fantasy points to wide receivers. So if you want to poke a real quick, easy hole into A.J. Brown, he's got the 3rd toughest matchup he could possibly have. So if somebody wants to not go that direction and they want to, even if they want to go with me and do these 3 stud running backs, if you want to be a little bit more balanced at the wide receiver position, I 100% get it. This to me is such a trash slate, like we said earlier, that I am focused on getting. I'm just focused on getting these studs in here. So I'm almost surely going to be playing A.J. Brown. Now, again, we got to save money. So I'm looking at somebody like Jonathan Mingo. I think Jonathan Mingo seems to be taking over that number 2 spot in this offense. You talked earlier about how bad the Colts defense has been. They are what? They are 24th in schedule adjusted fantasy points to receivers. So not terrible, but definitely a good matchup. He's so cheap, and I need to get a couple cheap receivers. So he's a guy that I'm almost surely playing. Demario Douglas, I think that's the guy you're going to talk about. So I'm not going to get too into it, but basically Kendrick Bourne is out. Washington is a very great matchup. He's been getting the ball at a decent pace. I'll let you talk about him. Jaden Reed's a guy that is very likely going to be in my lineup. I don't force correlation in cash. I absolutely do not. Whenever it naturally works itself out, I think it's a beautiful thing. And Jaden Reed naturally fits into
You
this
mean
lineup.
stacking, right? Like, is that
Yeah,
what you're
yeah.
saying?
Well, correlation in
Or
general.
yeah, but it could be either side.
I mean, so
right, yeah.
any factor of correlation,
Right.
but here I'm probably playing Jordan Love. Jaden Reed, like I said, naturally fits just this kind of salary that I need. At the wide receiver position, just happens to be a guy that
Top
my
10 in
quarterback
red zone targets and red zone targets inside the 5. It's crazy.
Yeah, exactly. So again, I just need 3x from this guy, and he's done it pretty consistently this season. Only but one game, and it was that game against Las Vegas, the same one that Love was terrible in. That he had a bad week. Other than that, he's been cash viable every week so far this year, even with Christian Watson back and Romeo Doubs catching touchdowns. I think that, some other guys that I don't probably have into consideration, so I'll just kind of name them off and you can do what you want with it. But they're in my cash pool. Nico Collins is the guy. Zay Flowers, he's more of a cash play than an MME play. I don't feel like the ceiling is there for him, but he's had a good floor just, with the role he's had there. I think Josh Downs is very interesting. He's been a guy that I've kind of been in on for a while here. He's got at least 3x. And let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and at least in 5 of the last 6 weeks. So, I mean, what more do you want out of him? Terry McLaurin, assuming that Samuel's out, I think that we're good. What we got here? I'm playing Kamara in all my leagues. I put $20 bet on his anytime TD to win 35. Then I took the 15 profit, put 10 on 2. So anyways, long story short, Jamie likes Alvin Kamara this week. Jamie, you'll be happy to know that my silly string pick is Alvin Kamara this week. So I think it's, what do I need to get over? 19.3 points or something. So hopefully you're happy with Kamara and my face is happy with Kamara this week. Last guy I want to mention, wide receiver, Michael Thomas. I mean, former absolute stud receiver. To be fair, he has not hit 3x yet this season, but he has been extraordinarily consistent. I mean, you're talking, like 2.5x each week, getting you at least 4 catches every single week. He's had at least 6 targets every single week, so he's nothing spectacular. I wouldn't play him in MME, but I think for cash, if that's the range that you find yourself in, like if I'm looking at my cash pool, I really don't have anybody else around there. Appreciate you stopping in, Joe. I don't really have anyone else in there. He
doesn't ever stop in for our show. He might be there for the first few minutes, and then you don't see any more comments. So now,
when the big dog is on screen,
right.
the owner tends to show up. He probably honestly is checking in to make sure I'm not saying anything crazy and getting us banned on YouTube. But I've got a lot of receivers there that I just named. I'm mostly interested to hear you personally talk about Douglas, but who else you got?
I like CD a lot this week.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
It's either going to be him and Cooks in most lineups. Again, it looks like I'm going to go with either Dak or Mac Jones.
Sure.
If I go with Dak, I will definitely pair him with 1 and 2. I mean, Lamb is if you want to get really safe. Eagles dead last versus wide receivers, give up almost 17 receptions, 190 yards per game to wide receivers, and number 1 wide receivers have been feasting the last couple of weeks. Again, just remember, Johan Dotson had done nothing all year, and then all of a sudden he showed up. So did Curtis Samuel. I love the Nico Collins play. I'm 1,000% with you. For whatever reason, he is a different player indoors at home than he is away. Unbelievable splits.
Do you know where Nico Collins went to college?
I do not. Was it LSU? Michigan.
University of Michigan, baby. Every time I always love when we get.
He's athletic, but I don't know if he went to Michigan.
Another one. So the Lions, as you're an Atlanta fan. I'm a Detroit fan. Detroit made a trade at the deadline. Was not for the defensive help that we wanted. We talked about, the Commanders trading off 2 edges. Would have loved to have either one of them. Do you know who the Lions traded for?
No.
Donovan Peoples-Jones. Where Donovan Peoples-Jones go to college?
Michigan,
baby. Anyways, sorry. I
just hope you guys don't get suspended. I don't want to hear it.
Well, we might.
I know, but I'm already over it. But so it's again insane splits. 4 away games this year. He's averaging 8.3 points on DK. His 3 home games, 27.1 points. Ooh. Tampa 24th versus opposing wide receivers on DK, versus number one receivers this year, they've given up 52 receptions. That's 7.4 per. 686 yards. That's 98 per. Again, this is just versus number one receivers. 4 number one receivers have finished top 5 for the week on DK facing Tampa. They've played 7 games. And Tampa runs a very similar amount of zone and gets a very similar pressure rate to the Indy Colts, who is one of the 2 teams that Collins hung a 30 burger on. So I really like Collins. I think he's a great value to it, that 5,800. You're getting a number one receiver for a discount. Cooks, again, if I end up wanting to save and not use Lamb, I do like Cooks. Touchdown and 2 straight. Again, this is his first year with Dak, but Cooks has always been that guy that he makes a lot out of, little receptions. It doesn't take but 3-4 catches for him to put up 10, 15 points. 14 points or more in 2 straight. Big thing, seeing 4 targets or more in every game he's played this season. Eagles allowing 26 targets and, again, almost 17 receptions per to opposing wide receivers this season. They're also allowing 1.5 touchdowns per game. And in the last 2 weeks, the number 2 wide receiver versus the Eagles, 14 receptions, 170 yards, and a score. And then the slam play for me that, I usually have about 4 or 5 guys that are the same, and then I will change up in my cash game lineup some of the lower price guys. But Demario Douglas is going in every single one. He's 4K versus Washington. It's one of those perfect storms where it's a great matchup. It's great usage. It's everything you want. We know Kendrick Bourne's on IR, but I think you could argue that Douglas was, from a talent perspective, the best receiver that New England had even before the Bourne injury. And they were starting to ramp him up even before that, because in the last 2 games, Bourne got injured in the second half last week. 13 targets, 9 receptions. He led New England in all wide receivers at snaps last week. Among wide receivers on the season, this is what I love. He's 19th among target rate. And that was before Kendrick Bourne was out.
Sure,
he is going to get peppered with targets. Washington, so bad versus wide receivers. The last 6 games, number one receivers have 44 receptions. 5 of 6 of them have 8 or more, and they're averaging 141 yards per game in that 6-game stretch with 7 touchdowns. Now, granted, full discretion, they played A.J. Brown twice. They've played some good ones. But, for instance, Drake London, who has 100-yard game this season, he had 9 catches for 125 yards versus the secondary. And again, if I end up going with Mac, which I kind of keep going back and forth, but
don't do it.
8,900 for that QB receiver, and then I can, potentially really get flexible with both my wide receivers, running backs, and flex. But those are the wide receivers I'm looking at this week.
Yeah, let's get into some tight ends. I don't have a whole lot of tight end. I know you don't either. In cash, I very, very rarely pay up a tight end. I haven't done so yet this year. The closest I've came is, I think I played Pat Freiermuth in week 3 or something.
Son of a bitch. Man.
Yeah, that's the game he got hurt too. So usually I try to keep it in the 3,000 and under range. As it's worked out this year, I don't feel like there's been a lot of full punt tight ends available to us. Not to this point. So I've been sitting somewhere in the $3,500 range on DraftKings, which is not really where I want to be. I've said for a very, very long time, even in MME, really, unless I'm just trying to get really different, it's either all the way up or all the way down for me. And that really holds true in cash. But this year I've consistently found myself playing some, guys in the $3,000 range at some point. I'm there again this week. I think a lot of people are going to play Trey McBride. He just got done having a great game last week. 9x on his salary for guys' sakes. I played him.
I gave him in your stead last week.
Yeah, he was a good play last week. I think a lot of people are going to play him again this week.
Scary.
My hesitation is Cleveland is number 1 schedule adjusted fantasy points to tight end,
especially if Kyler Murray doesn't play. Holy yikes!
Yeah, so Clayton Tune, we don't know where he's going to throw the ball. Like I said earlier, young, inexperienced quarterbacks tend to lean on short passes, so tight ends and receiver or tight end and running backs. They've also got guys that a Rondale Moore who catch short.
Cleveland knows, I think, first, right, against tight ends in both yards and receptions.
Yeah, I mean, they give up 7 points total a game to tight end. So that's where, my eye was immediately drawn to was Trey McBride, but I don't think I can do it whenever for $200 less, I can play Logan Thomas. And again, if Curtis Samuel is out, I think that Logan Thomas becomes an amazing play. Two games this year under 2.5x on his salary. He's been great. Last week he had 6 catches, 44 yards, and a touchdown. He goes up against New England. Let's see where New England sits against tight ends. 22nd scheduled adjusted fantasy points. So kind of in the same range of a lot of these guys I'm talking about. Not the best matchup in the world, but a very good one. Again, Curtis Samuel, if he ends up being out, Logan Thomas, I think, is a great play. Regardless of the fact, Logan Thomas is pretty much going to be locked into my lineup. That's about
also,
as far as I went.
New England has not played a murderer's row of tight ends. Like they've played Miami, who we know they don't throw a lot to the tight ends. They played, the Jets, John Conklin.
Yeah.
Wilson's not a very good quarterback. I mean, they really haven't. They haven't really been challenged by too many tight ends either.
Yeah, and so their ranking looks even worse than when you consider they're in the bottom half of the league and they haven't really gone up against anybody. I think David Njoku is interesting if you want to go there. Arizona traditionally has been really bad against tight ends. This year they haven't been so bad. They are, where are they? They are, of course I can't how do I not find Arizona?
I think they're 10th on DK this year.
5th in schedule adjusted fantasy points. So they've actually been one of the best against tight ends, but we know traditionally that's not been the case. With Deshaun Watson back, I think David Njoku ends up being an interesting play. At least 3x each of the last 2 weeks, 17 targets in that time frame. You can probably throw some of that out the window because it's going to be a different quarterback. But David Njoku is right on that.
They were ramping up his targets before Watson got hurt too.
Sure. So I think that's another route to go. That's probably, again, that's an MNE play to me. You can go there for cash. Don't get me wrong. It's only $100 more than McBride, so $300 more than Thomas if you want to go that route. So I think it's fine, but for me, that's more of an MME play. But somebody that I did want to mention, and then another one, if you want to go a smidge higher, Jake Ferguson. We talked about Dallas. Jake Ferguson, is the guy that gets good amount of targets and a good amount of good targets. If you check out those Twitter threads that I post, he's a guy that's getting a lot of end zone targets.
Number one.
Those not all targets are the same, and so he gets a lot of work down there. The points he's been putting up, aren't great. He hasn't been that good lately. 8 total targets the last 3 weeks. He had 7 in each of the 2 games prior to that. So it's been a little up and down. But
didn't he see like 5 last week? Because I think he only had like 3 for a 2-week stretch.
He had 4 and a touchdown. So he's a guy, again, that's probably an MME play. Another guy, I guess I'll just throw you out there if you want to go, really look at a punt. And that's Daniel Bellinger with Darren Waller out. If that's a route you really want to take, $2,500 on DraftKings. So that is your absolute full punt. So he only needs to, realistically, 7.5 points would be 3x. I don't think he gets there. Not without scoring a touchdown at least, but he's a guy that's at least interesting. So, if you want to put him in a cash lineup to save the money because, maybe you're trying to get up to Hurts or something, I can see it.
I've got really just one guy. I do want to mention, as long as he's cleared and everything, and I hate saying this, but Taysom Hill is becoming more and more of a value. Scored 12.3 points or more in 3 straight, averaging 17.2 points per game. That is second among tight ends the last 3 weeks. And again, finished 6th, and 3rd the last 3 weeks at tight end for the week. Big thing, he's now getting targets. 70% of his targets, 75% of his receptions have came in the last 3 weeks.
He's their goal line back.
Yep.
He's
still seen 15 rush attempts in that span. So you're basically getting a guy seeing, 4 or 5 targets and also getting 4 or 5 rush attempts against a bad Bears defense. So I don't hate it.
And they could always fuck around and you could throw a touchdown pass. You really don't know. My only concern is he's priced up now. He's at DraftKings. He's up to 47.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I I don't hate it. I mean, again, to me, that's a tournament play. But the upside, I mean, realistically, he's got a 40-point ceiling. And I mean, how many tight ends other than Kelsey could you say that about?
Right.
Now, he's not going to score 40 points, but realistically, he catches one, he runs 2 in, right there's 18 points. You know, he gets 50 yards on the ground, 50 yards through the air, or 50 yards, catching. And, all of a sudden now, wow, that's not that crazy of a day necessarily for him. And, you're pushing that 40-point mark. So I can't do it for cash at that price. But yeah, no, he's had at least 3x in each of the last 3 games, and it has gone up 3.2, 4.5, 5.6. So, basically, like I said, if he puts up 15 points, he's good to go. He's done that each of the last 2 weeks.
And Bears, again, are bad against running backs and tight ends. So, but the guy that I'm going with, and I'm not even blinking, Cade Otton, 3K at Houston. This is going your route of I'm going very cheap at tight end, and all I'm concerned about is I need 9 points or more.
Yeah.
He's had 9 receptions, 12 targets the last 2 weeks, seen 4 more targets in 4 of 6, 6 or more in half of those games. Among tight ends, he's first in snap share, 7th in routes run, 4th in route participation. And the Texans, they give up the most targets in the NFL to tight ends at 8.86 and the most receptions at 7 per game. So I think he catches at least 4 or 5 passes, minimally scores, 8, 9 points. He can finally score a touchdown, which he's so freaking overdue. And again, it's a great matchup. Remember Geno Smith, the second Falcons tight end, scored 15 points versus this team and scored a touchdown. So I really like Cade Otton 3,000. And again, it just gives me a lot of flexibility, and completely agree with you on the tight end position. It's got to the point where even Kelsey to me is not worth it. There's just, it's just such a shit show that you kind of got to go treat it like kind of the way we've always treated defenses, right? You start under 3K and just go. And that's, 3,500 for tight ends, kind of what I'm doing, and doing the same thing. I do want to say my co-host Joe Matz of our show on Thursday loves Logan Thomas this week. Loves him. So I definitely see the appeal in him. And again, New England, their defense is really struggling with injuries. So I think that game kind of turns into a sneaky shootout.
Yeah, earlier in the week, Cade Otton was in there for me for my cash tight end. But the more that I've looked into Thomas, the more that he has kind of just made sense. He's been really good.
He's one of the best takes I had this summer for season long was I was telling people you get Logan Thomas in the last round. This is all he's done his entire career.
Yeah.
Is everybody disrespects him. And then if you look at it from a fantasy perspective, he's always, a top 10 tight end when he's healthy.
Yeah, but Cade Otton, like I said, he was the guy that was in there from the get-go. He honestly should be in my pool because I do like the little bit of savings from him. And, like I was talking about those, Twitter threads that I do, Cade Otton consistently pops up because he runs so many routes.
I got all 3 of those stats from your Twitter thread, so I appreciate it.
Okay. Yeah. So he's on the field a whole bunch. When I was looking him up earlier,
it is shocking, though, the team can give up 7 receptions per to tight ends. That's crazy.
Yeah, a great matchup. He's a guy that, 2 straight games over 3X, 3 of the last 4, 5 of the last 6, all over 3X. So again, he's not a guy that's going to win you a GPP.
Right.
His ceiling is probably right around 10 points.
Yeah. But feel good about him getting there, right?
But he's very consistently going to get you there. Yeah. So if I had to play Cade Otton in cash, I wouldn't throw a fit about it. I would probably more consider Cade Otton in cash if by playing him the $500 in savings on DraftKings, if that could get me something meaningful, I wouldn't hesitate to do that. As I'm looking at the lineup I have now, if I were to make that move, I could go from Jaden Reed up to Douglas. So that's interesting, but I don't know. It's just, I don't know how much of an upgrade it really is. But anyways, long story short, Cade Otton is a really good call. Really good call. And then, man, when it comes to defenses, to be completely honest, you could throw every defense in a hat and you could pick one out and you
make
might
sure
get
though you take one right against one of these bad quarterbacks. Like it needs to be either one of those young quarterbacks or lifetime backups. I really think that the one thing I would be careful about this week is trying to stay away overall from receivers and quarterbacks that are, in these messy situations and try to take defenses against them because, I mean, it's a crapshoot with some of these QBs. It's one of the, I don't even know half of these guys. And I mean, think about how much time we spend talking about football.
No, it's weird. And, as much as I like to punt and pay down at tight end, it's almost an unofficial rule to do it at defense because salary does not correlate with production from a defensive standpoint.
I kept up with it last year. It was over 40% of the top 5 defenses, for the week, all the weeks of the season in DFS were under $2,800.
Yeah, so, it's so weird. So for me, pretty much, I mean, 3,000 on DraftKings is usually, that's where I start looking, right? Like I start looking at that 3,000. I work my way down. You usually can find 1 or 2 in that mix. Every now and again, you have to play something that's really, really disgusting. But like I was telling you earlier, I have an interesting decision this week as it sits right now between playing Bijan in cash and playing Josh Jacobs in cash. And part of the consideration is I can move up from the cheaper of the defenses that I have to the more expensive of the defenses I have. But as I said, I don't want to play my preferred defense as a priority. Yeah. So I'm going to make my decision on the running back, and I'm fine with either defense. I do prefer one over the other. The 2 defenses that I have are the Giants going up against Aiden O'Connell, and I've got the Patriots going up against Sam Howell. And it's not that Sam Howell is one of these terrible quarterbacks like we've been talking about, but Sam Howell gets sacked like crazy. And when it comes to, defense, this is something that Chris and I make mention of every single week. We're not playing these defenses because we're looking to get defenses that are going to give up, the least amount of points possible.
Yeah,
yeah, it really doesn't. I don't want my defense to give up.
Trophy.
Yeah, I don't want them to give up 40 points. Don't get me wrong, but a defense can give up 40 points and still
Cleveland
be
did last
a great
week
defense.
And scored, I think, like 14 points and was a top 5 defense. They gave up 39 freaking points.
Yeah, it's all about sacks and turnovers,
Yeah.
and a lot of it's about sacks. And Sam Howell likes to get sacked. So number of sacks for Sam Howell in order this week, this year: 6, 4, 9, 5, 5, 5, 6, and somehow the Eagles only got 1 last week. So I know I'm going to get 4 or 5 sacks. Probably there's 4 points built.
You're going to get 4 or 5. My Falcons, who can't pressure the quarterback for anything, got 5 sacks versus them. That was how many sacks we had in all the games before the game versus Washington.
Yep. And so, the reason that, Sam Howell almost won me, $100,000 last week is because he throws the ball so damn much. The volume is there. And with that is going to come a lot of sacks. Now, when I'm playing Sam Howell, honestly, I don't give a shit if he gets sacked 10 times.
Yeah.
If anything, that just gives me more opportunities for him to pass the ball. Like, that's cool.
For more yards.
But from a defensive, standpoint, those are a lot of points. So New England is my preferred defense, but I'm also fine with the Giants going up against O'Connell. Like I was talking about with the lineup earlier, if I play Jacobs, I have to play the Giants. If I play Bijan, I can play New England. At the end of the day, neither one of those might be a good defense. Who knows? It could be anybody, but that's where I'm looking at.
For me, it is the Giants. Like it had to be. They thought Jimmy Garoppolo was going to start that game, and that's the way they priced it because it's ridiculous. They're the low. I mean, the Bears versus the Saints are more expensive than the Giants. I just feel like that's such a value. A reminder to people, after the Dolphins loss, in Buffalo, they only gave up 14 points. At home versus Washington, 7, who, again, this is a Washington that scored 30 twice on Philly this year.
Yeah, throwing the ball.
And I know the Jets' offense is terrible, but they only held them to 13 points. They threw for a combined negative 9 yards, and the defense still only gave up 13 points. And you're getting a guy in Aiden O'Connell who is, basically he is a rookie quarterback making only a second start. I just think that's a great value. If you're
we want sacks and we want them to throw a couple picks. If we get lucky and they score a touchdown, you can't bank on that. But if you get lucky and you pick a defense that scores a touchdown, you are golden.
And actually, I wanted to look that up because I meant to earlier. So they
Giants
have
have scored
10
one
sacks
touchdown
the
this year.
last 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to Buffalo, they didn't have any of that game, but 10 the
Nope.
last 2 weeks.
Yeah, they haven't had, other than the last 2 games. So prior to the last 2 games, they had 5 total sacks on the season. So when they played Washington and they got 6 sacks, and that 1 week, they had more sacks in week 7 than they had in the first 6 weeks combined. But, they're going up against a rookie quarterback, and that's usually a good thing. And either way, if you can justify a $2,300 defense on DraftKings, you're already in great shape, and you can absolutely justify the Giants. Like I said, I would rather play New England.
Oh, I would too,
but
sure.
I am not disappointed to play the Giants, and that's where I told you I've got to really decide: do I really want to play Josh Jacobs or do I really want to play Bijan? To be determined. I will tell you, I'm still leaning Josh Jacobs because again, it's a volume thing,
right?
And man, if I knew that Bijan was going to get 10 targets, it'd be a different story. But I also don't know that Josh Jacobs isn't going to get 10 targets.
Right. No, because
you
he
know
got
what I mean?
a ton last time.
And I know that I'm pretty sure that Josh Jacobs will have more carries and more yards on the ground. So
that's a fair assumption.
I don't know.
I do want to mention the one other defense, especially for bigger events.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of like the Arizona Cardinals versus Cleveland and like them even more with Watson playing because I think that if Walker was playing, the Browns would just run the ball, which is the most effective way to beat up on Arizona. If they try to sling it around, we've seen Watson has just, he's been a turnover machine. I just think there's some upside there. I really do.
What's that one restaurant that we like to go to, Keith? What's it called? Shenanigans?
Shenanigans? You gonna pistol whip me?
Oh my God. Well, a liter of cola. I am curious, Jamie. I should have put this up earlier. You said, what do you think about Houston this week? Can you, what do you mean by that? You just mean Houston defense?
I guess the defense. I think he's talking the defense, yeah.
Okay. Well, let's see. Houston is going up against Tampa. They're 3,000. So I like to look at the schedule adjusted. What has Tampa done? So Tampa has given up the 6th fewest schedule adjusted fantasy points to defenses. They've been giving up 5.7 points. So I don't really like that. For less money, I can play the Patriots. For less money, I can play the Giants.
I think Baker doesn't take very many sacks, right?
He does not. He does not. Now, again, from an MME perspective, here's
right. Yeah,
you're right. Defense at the price. From an MME perspective, again, specifically large field, knock yourself out. You can play any motherfucker you want to, and it's hard for me to argue with it. But from a cash perspective, which is kind of where we're focused here, Houston is not even on the radar because the Giants and Patriots are such better plays and they're cheaper. So it just takes anyone over $2,900 in cash to me is dead because I can play the Patriots at 29. And then it comes down to, do I need the extra savings where I have to play the Giants? If so, I don't care. That's fine with me. So, yeah, I think that does it for us, Keith. I mean, for not having a whole lot of guys to talk about, I think it did allow us to get into a little more depth about things.
I don't think anybody's accused either one of us of being short in our responses.
No, because, I mean, sometimes it just depends,
we're thinkers,
right?
man. When you think, you have to talk things out. That's the way I do things, too. So.
And sometimes, honestly, I probably prefer to have a smaller pool because – even in our Discord, I do a write-up for every player, right?
Great write-up, by the way.
Thank you,
really
sir.
Good stuff. Yeah, man.
And if I have less guys, then I have more time to, deliver on each. And not that I, will skimp out just because the player pool is bigger, but it's easier for me, obviously, to put more into it whenever I don't have quite so much. And then this week, it allowed me, like I said, on the Discord, when I was considering Aiden O'Connell, I was walking through verbally. I was typing out, hey, this is what I'm doing, and so I was kind of walking people through because I get a lot of people who will ask me, hey, how do you come up with the cash pool? And I'm like, well, that's not really something I can just answer via like text,
right.
Like that's kind of complicated.
How much time you got, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's like every week is so different that it's not like, hey, this is what I do. It's not the same, So one thing that I mentioned, I probably won't because it's I don't know. It's just a lot. But one thing that I suggested that I would consider at least is going on, doing a recording like this, sharing my screen, and going through and, hey, this is how I built my player pool this week. And now that's not something I would make public. That's something that I would record. I would make private to where you need a link to be able to access that video, put it in Discord and say, hey, it isn't so much about how I develop my player pool for this particular week, but this was my process. So maybe you can learn something, with, seeing my process of doing it. I don't know that I'll actually do that. I probably won't, to be honest with you, but it is interesting because, for me in the Discord, we talk a lot of times about, it's not about, it's about teaching people how to fish, right? Like,
yep.
I don't really want people to just see my cash pool and then blindly follow me. Like, I mean, if that's what somebody wants to do, if they don't have the time, they don't have the time to do any more, and that's what they're fine with. They're fine with paying just to get that cash pool and running with it, then cool. But pretty much everyone there is also trying to learn. So, and that's why I like doing those write-ups as well, because it's easy to say, hey, I'm in on Jordan Love and Aiden O'Connell this week. And most people, well, why? Like, why is that? Like, can you explain, why don't you want to play Jalen Hurts? Well, it's not that I don't want to play Jalen Hurts. Well, why isn't he in your pool? Well, that's, I want to explain, why. And so now what I see a lot of times in Discord is now people, before I put my stuff out, will say, hey, Dave, this is kind of where I'm at this week. Can't wait to see your pool to see how close I am to what you come up with. So, I like the teaching. Yeah. So Jamie agrees,
And Jamie, if you haven't checked out our show from last night, the DFS Kickoff show with me and Joe, you can go check that out right now. And then that way you don't have to worry about another show not starting. Right,
well, he said he needs to start another show. He's cooking. Needs something to listen to.
There you go.
But yeah, I think that'll probably do it for us there, Keith. I think, as much of a garbage week as it is, this week, I honestly think that it's going to be at least a good cash week. I'm not super into MME this week. A lot of it is just because I haven't had the time, but I still think from a cash perspective, I kind of think the route that I'm taking people down, the route that I'm going to go, at least, I think that it's going to be good. And I'm really interested and really excited to see if I do go Jordan Love, which I think I'm going to. I really am interested to see how that's going to go, because in MME, I do want leverage. I do want to be unique in places. In cash, I don't give a shit about that. I don't even consider it. But I think that, I'm the only person that I've seen touting Jordan Love for cash this week. And so I'm either going to be a genius or I'm going to be a complete fool. But I trust myself.
Either way, 1 week doesn't do that anyway.
No, but
that was one of the hardest lessons I had to learn when I got into this is, sometimes you're just going to be wrong, sometimes you're going to be right. And everything you do is correct. It's just Ritter last week was a prime example. Heineke scored 13 points in the second half. If Ritter could have put, just 7 in the first and the 13 in the second, that's 20. But some weeks, you're right. And some weeks you're wrong. I like the Love. I mean, you did a great job explaining it. And I do like it. You compare him with Jaden Reed, who he's going to have him another monster game, like what he did against Falcons. It's coming for sure.
We'll see. I mean, it might be a 1 week thing, but again, I'm either going to look really smart or I'm going to look really dumb. Either way, I always look at it as I don't give a shit what other people are doing. I really don't. I like the fact that nobody else is talking about Jordan Love, because if I'm right, that's just another notch on the belt, right? To say, hey, man, like, we're doing things differently over here and we're successful. We've been, I don't know. Anyone that's been following along with, our Discord has been winning money consistently all year. We're not going to win every week. That's impossible. And I'd be the first to tell you, if somebody were to, reach out and say, hey, Dave, I'm thinking about signing up. How many weeks, do you plan on winning in cash? Well, I'm telling you, it's not going to be 18. It's not going to be 10. Well, maybe it'll be 10, but it's not going to. There's going to be losses in there, and sometimes they're going to be together. We had two losing weeks in a row. Now that's been sandwiched around 4 winning weeks and 2 other winning weeks. So I mean, there's been some losses in there, but that's going to happen. Lamar. I didn't expect Lamar Jackson 2 weeks ago to be an absolute bomb either. But
I was with you there. I was with you.
So you never,
100%.
so you never do quite know. But yeah. Anyways, I don't know if it'll be Chris and I, or if it'll be Keith and I, or if it'll be just me. But Sunday at noon, at least I'll be here. To finish up the Sunday social show, give you all the DFS information you need heading into lock. The way that it sounds, it may well be Keith and I. So Keith, I don't even know if you're available yet. I hadn't really thought that far ahead, but worst case scenario, I'll definitely
make it
here.
work.
Keith may well be joining me. I don't know, but either way, at bare minimum, I'll be here. Get you primed and ready to go. So Keith, really appreciate you joining, man.
Yeah, man. Always a pleasure.
I would. We could talk all day if we really wanted to. I don't know if anyone else.
Yeah, we did 30 minutes before we started the show.
I know, and I don't know if anyone else would enjoy it, but I would, and that's really all I care about, I guess. So call me selfish,
brother.
But appreciate you, my friend.
Yeah,
and maybe I'll see you
on
Sunday.
Chris.
Yeah, for sure.
God Almighty, dude. Praying to the porcelain God. Feel better, buddy.
All right, man. We'll take care, everybody. We'll see you later.